The month I retired, some people at work expressed some questions like, how did you do this? Are you sure you're going to have enough money? And so I wrote this sort of white paper describing my thinking process. That was the spring of that year. And then I took kind of 6 months off just to decompress from work. But I'd always wanted to write and possibly write a book. And I think it was late in the year 2011 that I thought, well, I should try this blogging thing. And I wrote a few articles or posts and did a few more, and then got some publicity, started getting some traffic, got interviewed by Farnoosh Torabi pretty early on. Yahoo News did a video. They sent a film crew to our house. That brought thousands of new readers. And at that point, it was like, yeah, okay, this is what I should be doing with my time right now. I'd prepared for it my whole life because I've done many backpacking trips, many long overnight rock climbs even. I know the dangers, I know what to do about them, I have the best equipment I can buy. Still, when you're on your own, you're the one that has to solve the problem if something really serious happens. And I was always uber careful for the pieces of the trail I did by myself. I literally slow my pace down. I take time to make decisions about hopping over rocks and logs and stream crossings, being very deliberate, knowing that I can't afford to twist an ankle or get myself hurt out here. I don't like taking big risks. I'd rather take a small piece, evaluate how that went, perfect the system, do a little bit more. And then finally on the trail, the last year, 2021, I did about half the trail over a few months one summer. So I got some of the flavor of what it would have been like to be a thru hiker. But I'm not, as you say, I did it in sections, no more than 4 or 5 days at a time. I can't imagine what it's like to be a thru hiker, but when I touched that milepost on the very last segment, it was unbelievable to just stand there. I was by myself in this huge plateau in middle Colorado, a remote spot, and just reflect back over the 6 years and the almost 500 miles I'd covered to have achieved that goal.
Welcome to Catching Up to FI, a podcast on mindset, money, and life for late starters of any age on their journey to financial independence. I'm Bill, and I'm a late starter.
I'm Jackie, and I'm also a late starter, and we're your host. We're here to help you on your journey to financial independence, no matter where you're starting.
We're going to talk to experts, other late starters, and explore topics related to our mission.
Join us as we catch up to FI together.
Hello, and welcome back to Catching Up to FI. We're on a mental and physical journey today, Jackie. We realize that life is broken up into segments and parts, and it's not smooth. It can be bumpy. There are peaks and valleys. And today we're going to talk about some of those peaks and valleys with an expert on retirement and the peaks and valleys leading up to it and thereafter. Darrow Kirkpatrick. Will you do us the favor, Jackie, of introducing our guest?
Yeah, and you know what? I think I'm going to call him OG expert and FI person because he's been around for a long time. So Darrow Kirkpatrick, he retired from a 29-year career in civil and software engineer in April of 2011 at the age of 50. Now, that's kind of a familiar FIRE person, right? Well, that same year, he founded the popular blog Can I Retire Yet? And it's focused on the personal finance needs of anyone who is thinking about retirement or early retirement like he did. The blog won a Plutus Award for Best Retirement Blog in 2019. Darrow's personal finance books include Can I Retire Yet? How to Make the Biggest Financial Decisions of the Rest of Your Life. And the other one was Retiring Sooner, How to Accelerate Your Financial Independence. So for Darrow, time in nature is what really spoke to him. And that's one reason he's always been drawn to trails. He's been immersed in hiking, biking, and technical rock climbing for 5 decades. He dreamt of completing a long distance hiking trail to prove he's at home in the wilderness. As an adult, he sacrificed that dream and dedicated himself to raising a family and managing software development at a high-pressure startup. Then a nervous breakdown derails his career. With the support of family and mindful meditation, he recovered after a year-long sabbatical. Working again, he reached financial independence and retired early to Santa Fe, New Mexico in the Southern Rockies. At last, he could pursue his hiking dream. He chose the Colorado Trail because of its proximity, beauty, and rugged challenge. And he's shared all of this in a memoir called Two Sticks, One Path, Our Journey Beyond Fear on the Colorado Trail. And it chronicles a 6-year section of hiking on crutches. So Darrow believes it's important to take care of yourself, smell the roses, and not sacrifice too much life quality in the present for an unknown future. So Darrow, welcome to Catching Up to Fi.
Thanks, Jackie. Great to be here.
So Darrow, you retired at 50. Why?
I did not enjoy my corporate job, at least at the end. And honestly, the outdoor sports were the thing that always brought me to life and made life worth living. And I wanted more time to do that. And we had enough money. We lived frugally and modestly and saved diligently. And I didn't have to wake up and run conference calls. So I decided not to do that, do something different.
So did you always know that? Did you grow up frugal and with sort of an eye on finance? I did not. What was the reason that you found this path as opposed to the traditional path of the paycheck to paycheck consumption lifestyle that so many Americans and so many late starters succumb to?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I do have to credit my parents somewhat. They were frugal. My father was a military officer, so he didn't make piles of money. He didn't really have an option to save up a great deal, although he did, I guess he retired after a 25-year career. My mom was very frugal. So I did have those habits and behaviors. I was lucky. My wife also was a similar mindset. And then the things we enjoyed most in life, the camping, the hiking, the climbing, the biking, those are dirt cheap. And we didn't get that much pleasure out of fancy cars or big houses. And so it was just kind of a natural path for us.
So when you retired, Darrow, what was your number? Like these days it's 25 times your expenses or whatever, but you was in the tech field, a highly paid field and all that. So I'm wondering, were you making gobs of money and a tech millionaire, or were you still a modest income and things are kind of on the average side?
Yeah, it's not a super flashy career. I did work for a software company, but we made civil engineering software. This was not .com type stuff with 7-digit salaries or anything like that. I did have a little bit of ownership in the company, enough that when I sold it, it let me pay off our house in Tennessee. But again, we're not talking major bucks here. We were frugal. We did invest intelligently. And I mostly used the retirement calculators to get a comfort level. And we were in that neighborhood of the 4% rule, 25x. But I was also using calculators to project how our savings would fare. And that all gave me the comfort level to retire in 2011. Really important footnote, my wife was a public school teacher. She worked several more years and we got retirement health benefits from her. I could not have done it otherwise. We had enough money, but we did not have a health care option without her retirement benefits.
Yeah, a big deal. And was that pre-Affordable Care Act?
Let's see, Affordable Care Act was 2010-ish, I think. So it was right around that time, but it was very new. I distinctly remember not feeling confident about pulling the plug in my paycheck and throwing myself on this new law that everyone was still figuring out. Yeah, it was a much better feeling to have her retirement benefits through Blue Cross Blue Shield. I knew that was going to be there for us, and it has been until I went on Medicare recently.
Did you suffer from the 1 more year, 2 more year syndrome? Was it hard? You said it's hard to pull that plug. How did you manage that? Was the math enough?
I did suffer from that a little bit. I actually got pretty close. The Great Recession, 2008-9 timeframe, I was really close to pulling the plug then, according to the numbers, and I probably rightfully suffered from maybe I should work a few more years just to be sure. Our son wasn't in college yet. But then by 2011, my own financial knowledge had increased. The calculators had gotten better. My readiness to leave the corporate job was at an all-time high. So everything came together. I had no doubt at that point.
And so you mentioned retirement calculators, and you talk about them in your book, Can I Retire Yet?, which is sort of a personal journey, a personal manifest on how you managed the decisions in leading to that, and then you shared it with others. Are the calculators you use still valid, or are there better ones now that we should encourage our audience to use if they want to DIY their own retirement?
Yeah, Prolana was available at that time. And I have to say, I don't stay up to speed on this area any longer now that Chris has taken over the blog. So probably people should do their own research. But I know that the Can I Retire Yet blog features Prolana, which I've always thought highly of, and then New Retirement, which I guess has been renamed. And so those would probably be my starting points these days.
Yeah, we support Bolden, which is the new brand that I took over for New Retirement and Steve Chang. I use that software, and I think it's critical to help you reassure yourself that not only are you on the path, but give you an idea of when you will be at the financial finish line, even if it's not your mental, physical, emotional finish line.
So why don't we talk a little bit about the blog since you mentioned it, because I believe it was before its time. So had you retired when you started the blog, or the blog came after you retired?
The month I retired, some people at work expressed some questions like, how did you do this? Are you sure you're going to have enough money? And so I wrote this sort of white paper describing my thinking process. That was the spring of that year. And then I took kind of 6 months off just to decompress from work. But I'd always wanted to write and possibly write a book. And I think it was late in the year 2011 that I thought, well, I should try this blogging thing. And I wrote a few articles or posts and did a few more, and then got some publicity, started getting some traffic, got interviewed by Farnoosh Torabi pretty early on. Yahoo News did a video. They sent a film crew to our house. That brought thousands of new readers. And at that point, it was like, yeah, okay, this is what I should be doing with my time right now.
Oh, wow. You have to try to get us the video so we can include it, because now you've got CNBC, Make It does a whole series on FIRE with the video crews and stuff. And I think it's Market Watch and all that. So I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, I have a copy. I don't know if it's online, but I'll send you whatever I can.
Oh, yeah. Would love to see it, because, again, you were before your time. So was Mr. Money Mustache around at the time? Do you remember?
Yeah, but he was small. I met him and hung out with him at FinCon in about 2013 or something. I got to know him, but it was before his site really took off.
What does it feel like to be an OG on the front end of this new wave of early retirement? And it seemed like the Great Recession sort of promoted this. The bull market encouraged this, and a lot of firees rode that bull market in an ongoing fashion into their early retirement. And in some ways, you got lucky. Did luck play a role in this for you?
Yes, I've had very fortunate timing in terms of my investment portfolio. There's no doubt about it. Other time frames, this wouldn't be as happy a story now, but my net worth has grown throughout my retirement. We really haven't had serious money concerns and have been able to coast a bit based on the stock market.
And one of the things people that are in this movement have trouble with now is flipping the switch on spending. They watch their net worth grow, and it's like, okay, we now have die with zero, and sort of making sure that we take full advantage of our years and then pass our wealth on to the next generation in our lives as we're still living. Are you able to do that? Do you feel like you have too much money at some point because you aren't spending it necessarily as fully as you would because of fears of ending up under a bridge eating cat food?
Well, there's some flavors of that, yes. I would say that we feel very comfortable with most projections. The big question mark is long-term care and healthcare, and that's on our minds because we've seen it with our parents. And both my wife and I have conditions that are a little unpredictable. What's our end-of-life picture going to cost us? If that's not astronomical, we have all the money in the world and we should be traveling internationally and buying fancy cars and doing stuff that we don't really care to do. But I would say we're a little bit cautious just because of the possible long-term care scenario.
So, Darrow, about the long-term care, your plan is to just self-pay? Like, do you have a long-term care insurance policy or anything?
I don't. I've written a couple articles on that. Every time I dug into it, I just felt like this was not a good value. It was expensive, and it covers sort of the medium time frame that we can self-insure for 4 or 5 years. We can self-insure for 10 years. It's if one of us needs nursing home care for 20 years, we might have a problem. And no long-term care insurance helps you with those kinds of numbers that I've ever seen.
And then the evolution of portfolios sort of plays into this too. Can you tell us a little bit about your accumulation phase? Did you discover index funds on the front end? And how did you manage your growth portfolio? Because a lot of our late starters are in that, and they want to see growth as quickly as possible within market constraints. What did you do in the accumulation phase?
Honestly, I was pretty conservative, probably more conservative than the average FIRE approach would dictate these days. Jim Collins with his 90% or more in stocks. I could never stomach that, and there wasn't great information back when I was in my important accumulation phase, so I pretty much targeted a 50-50 portfolio, bonds and stocks. And I followed an investment newsletter by a guy who's long passed, Richard Young, but he was a big fan of index funds. He was a big fan of low-cost investing, and he was very conservative. He preached more or less a 50-50 asset allocation. And the good thing about that is it kept me from jumping off the bridge during the dot-com blow-up, for example. And back when there was less support, less information around FIRE, it kept me saving, kept me from doing anything crazy, selling off at the worst time.
And so how long was your journey? You retired at 50. So was your accumulation phase functionally 25, 30 years?
I have a cool chart. I can't put my fingers on it. It shows my net worth. I started using Quicken in like 1991. And I have a cool chart of my net worth from that year on. It grew pretty steadily and grew faster in the final corporate years where I had a higher salary.
Well, it goes to show that you can do this if you're in the long term without losing sleep, and even in a 50 to 70% equity side portfolio. Did you stick to the simple philosophy, or did it get complicated, and did you make any mistakes along the way?
Oh, I certainly made mistakes. Some of my first investments, I used a financial advisor one of my business associates used and recommended, and he sold me some expensive funds that I then sold very quickly. I did a little bit of dabbling in dot-com stocks. I remember buying Red Hat, a Linux company, and watching it quadruple and not selling, and watching it go all the way back down and barely get out of it without losing any money. But those were small sums that I played with. The six-digit amounts that I needed to retire went into index funds, mostly Vanguard funds. For the most part, left them alone and just let them do their thing over the long haul.
I think that's kind of the cycle that a lot of us go through. It's better to make those mistakes when we don't have much money, because I had started trying to invest during the dot-com bubble. I'm sure I had Red Hat. I had something called salon.com. I think I put $1,000 in it. It went all the way down to $80. I'm like, well, I finally sold it and said, hey, I can go get dinner or something like that. But it's probably best that we make those mistakes when we have $500 versus $5 million or whatever. So I definitely feel that. So with the blog, at what point did you come to the conclusion that you were kind of done with it? You had said all you needed to say, and were you going to just end the blog, or was the intention was just to hand it over to Chris or bring him on board to mostly manage it?
I was really lucky that he kind of appeared in my life and appeared on the blog. I think he did some guest posts. Maybe he interviewed me for his own blog that he had at the time. We were both climbers. We really hit it off just personally and then in terms of our financial philosophy. But I was starting to run out of steam. It had been about 10 years, and I write by learning. I learn stuff and I write about what I learned. And I'd pretty much learned what I needed to get through this phase of my financial life. And I felt some frustration. I was getting maybe more interest from readers that I thought were really well off and were spending their retirement trying to fine-tune their taxes and estate plans. And I felt like all of us should get on and do something more interesting with our lives than just that. That is very interesting and important at a certain stage. But for me, I got to a point where I pretty much had the finances dialed in. I could see health issues and energy issues coming up with my aging, and I wanted to get on and do what really mattered to me. And fortunately, I was able to hand the blog off to a great person to carry on the tradition, and Chris has done really well with it.
Yeah, that's interesting. That'll be a great segue into the next phase of life for you. But before we do that, I don't want to lose track of the financial, because one thing that is not talked about enough in this space is a transition to a drawdown portfolio. And how do we structure that differently? We're all about accumulation. And drawdown is a more complex beast. And in some ways, you need a more diverse approach to it so that you aren't succumbing to sequence of returns risk or early drawdown catastrophe. How did you manage that?
I don't have a great answer, and that's probably one reason I got to a point where I was starting to run out of steam on the blog. And I wish I had once envisioned my third financial book was going to be all about the drawdown, the distribution phase. And I did do some original research. I looked at trying to draw down assets based on what the CAPE ratio was doing. So the idea being you're trying to pull out the assets that had grown the most and keep yourself from selling stuff that was down. And so I modeled withdrawal strategies based on what CAPE was doing and got some indications that, yeah, this might be the better approach. And it's loosely what I've followed myself, but none of it ever got to the point that I was confident in writing about it or telling other people that this is how they should manage their money. I guess the basic rule of thumb I've followed is try to sell my assets in a balanced way, not try to predict the market and not try to do it in reaction to the market. But honestly, it's been ad hoc for me, and I don't have the ultimate solution to that question.
How do you create your paycheck? And do you do it monthly? Do you have a bucket strategy? Do you draw from your fixed income assets and try and protect your equities alone? And if you sell equities, how does it feel to do that?
Yeah, it's been a little bit of all of the above strategy. Also throwing in, we've got an inheritance in the middle of this, which has obviously eased our cash flow. Part of the inheritance was an annuity that my mom bought that I would never recommend, but the fact is we owned it, so we're getting an income stream from that. I would say the rest of it has been closest to a bucket strategy where I would tend to sell, I'd say roughly at 6-month intervals and trying to always top off. We have probably 2 years of cash or short-term bonds on hand. So trying to top that off every 6 months, doing my best to pull assets out in a balanced way. Yeah, and again, I wish I could give you a better formula. If I had one, I'd write about it.
It sounds like, Darrow, you don't think it needs to be that complicated. There's a lot of people that talk about drawdown and they get really deep in the woods with it and these projections and all these lines of Monte Carlo simulation and all of that. So do you think we overcomplicate that part of it now that you're in drawdown?
A little bit. I think that stuff's really useful for making the decision that I probably have enough, that it's probably going to last through all these scenarios. But I have to say, my personal experience getting into retired life is always throwing you changes. And whatever formula or plan you think you have, more money will show up one month and then there's an expense the next month. I've found it hard to automate that process of drawing down our assets.
So did you just plow through the Great Recession and into your retirement with a 50-50 portfolio, or were there any adjustments there?
No, it's 50-50, 45-55. I've been in that range pretty much my whole investing life. And I realize now I could have done a lot better if I wanted to be more aggressive, but it didn't suit my personality.
Yeah, I see a lot of risk tolerance in the FIRE movement. Like you say, 90-10 all the way till retirement and then some downshifting. And then when the Great Recession happened, did you fear that your retirement was potentially blown out of the water?
Not really, because I'd had this mentor, like I said, Richard Young, who wrote this investing newsletter. He'd been through many market cycles. He knew about buy and hold. So I had this voice in my ear saying, if you just hang in there, your shares are going to bounce back and more. And that is what happened. So I've always had a long-term strategy, long-term approach.
So have you done anything different with your portfolio since retiring? For instance, we've got a lot of new asset classes and crypto and stuff like that. And you dipped your toe in during the dot-com bubble a little bit. So anything different there?
Not with the big money, not with the important money. I did, because I'm a software engineer and I did get the feeling that Bitcoin had potential technically. I bought 10,000 of Bitcoin 2016, I think, which obviously has turned out to be a ridiculously good investment, except that I've sold it along the way. That was pure speculation, nothing I would recommend to anybody. I was a software engineer, so I had a little bit of a background to make the judgment, okay, this has some merit. So I just bring that up to answer your question, but not as any kind of recommendation. Again, I did it with play money that was not going to affect our retirement.
So you were financially set. You didn't have necessarily the worry. You had a sleep factor throughout accumulation and going into retirement. You asked the financial questions. What other questions do we need to ask ourselves before we make that transition into retirement?
Well, practically the healthcare is a huge one, and it was even a bigger deal 15 years ago. But then the other thing that I've seen is, what are you going to do with your time? What's going to give you self-worth, keep you interested in life? And for some of us, can't picture ever not being busy. I have a to-do list, project list, miles long. I need many lifetimes. But I have good friends, good, smart people who had distinguished careers, and they have trouble deciding what to do with themselves when they retire. So I think it deserves some thought for all of us.
So what were your plans? What were your goals and dreams, and did it work out that way for you?
The first one was writing a book. I'd always been a strong sort of technical writer. It had been useful in my career. And I did dream of writing some kind of book. I don't think I was super focused on what it was going to be. But once I had a critical mass of blog posts, it was clear I could turn them into a book. And so that's where my first two books came from. And then later on, as I started to feel the effects of aging, my bucket list that had to do with me being physically active got very important. And that's where the idea of finishing a long distance hiking trail came from.
I think your experience and your decision to put your health first, like what you did was very physical, the hiking, the biking, and all of that. So you soon realized that at 70, I'm not going to be able to enjoy this like I can in my 50s. So I think everybody should kind of think about that a little bit. What are you going to be able to do at 50 that you can't do at 70? So it may be looking at enjoying the journey a little bit more and slowing it down versus I want to hit it at 65 and then what can you do at 65? In your memoir, we read through that and it was amazing, but I kept thinking in 10 years, you probably wouldn't be able to do that. So you have to tell us a little bit about the trek and kind of what you ended up using in order to do that, but you didn't give up.
Yeah, that was really the epic adventure of my last 6 years or so. And so not only was I getting a sense that my body wouldn't be able to do this anymore, like, for example, I've pretty much given up rock climbing. I can do a little bit, but that I was so passionate and spent decades doing tons of major and hard climbs in this country. And I'm at a point now where I can really see, gosh, I cannot do a lot of that. And I knew the same thing was going to happen with hiking. In addition to that, I had this series of lower body injuries. Pretty much everything you can have happen to your legs happened, culminating with a hamstring overuse injury that kind of turned into chronic pain and chronic back pain and had me in bed for a while one summer. There were some mental aspects of that too. But during that, a doctor friend of mine recommended that I try out these things called forearm crutches because he said you can really get out and be active with them. And this is a much better crutch design than the underarm crutches that they prescribe for short-term injuries. The forearm crutches go around your forearm and they kind of give you an extra set of legs, and you can get out and really move and get aerobic exercise with them. And so they wound up being really critical to my recovery. And even though I mostly recovered from that injury, I realized I really needed this assistance to stay safe when I'm doing hard hiking. Going downhill, my knees aren't strong enough to carry a pack, and so I really needed this assistance. But with it, I was able to do some really long, hard hiking and eventually the Colorado Trail.
How did you deal with being, say, disabled? Because it seems like you had extreme ability. You climbed extreme rock faces in Yosemite. You did climbs that expert climbers do. And then going from an expert climber to giving in to, I still want to do this, but now I'm struggling with a disability and chronic pain. What was that journey like? Because that's not just a physical journey, that's a mental journey.
It was very humbling. And it was humbling. I don't label myself as disabled, but I have dealt with disability. I have been perceived as handicapped and disabled. Often, I still hike with crutches, any difficult hike. And so people perceive me differently because of that. And I had to let go of some ego. But I think it was easier for me than I see some people who clearly could use a cane or assistive device or not using them. And that's sad to me because they can enable much more activity and much safer activity. And so being an engineer, I eventually just perceived these crutches as great tools. I mean, these are so effective. I can climb 3,000 feet with these crutches. I don't care what I look like or what people think of me, because I'm getting out here and I'm doing these hard things and enjoying life. And that became much more important than the label somebody might want to put on me.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of folks, and I deal with this in my family, more in their 70s and 80s, where they foreclose. And you can foreclose earlier on life and just say, okay, I can't do this, therefore I won't do this. It's not the mental approach that I can't do it this way, therefore I will do it another way. You are inspirational to those people that would say, you know what, can't, won't, I give up.
Yeah, I like your term. I'd never thought of that, but foreclosing, that's perfect. I think people give up too early for whatever reason. Again, being an engineer and a problem solver, I've always been really interested. Okay, I want to achieve this goal, but there are these obstacles in my way. What tools, techniques, training can I get to make this happen? And so that's helped me through some of these things.
And what I find interesting is earlier in life, the connection to your father with this journey. It started with the Boy Scouts. It started with your dad. He instilled sort of a love of outdoors in you. And it was nourishing and healing for you because in your corporate life, you had significant mental challenges. And we hear about this very commonly where people need semi-retirements, according to Jillian Johnsrud. And you knew what semi-retirements were before she really promoted them. You took a year off after having a mental breakdown and panic attacks. That must have been incredibly traumatic, not only for you, but for your family.
Yes, good point. And good to remind us that that was a semi-retirement. I call it a sabbatical in the book. And the whole thing was enabled by our savings, by our frugal lifestyle, and the fact that we had a huge emergency fund available to us. I couldn't work, or at least I couldn't do intellectual work. I was struggling to make it through the days and get enough sleep at night. But the fact that we had this emergency fund, we had savings, let me take a year off to get my house in order. And it was a struggle and a long process with a lot of support from my family, from not sleeping and being a wreck to eventually learning mindfulness meditation, giving myself the space to rest and come back and be able to perform in my old job, albeit very carefully with a little more guardrails in place to keep myself from getting stressed out.
Well, I really appreciated you being so open about the mental health part and the breakdown. Back in the day, it wasn't even really acknowledged or seen as a sickness or an illness that needed to be addressed and taken care of. And I think we all, if not ourselves, but people close to us, we've been touched by that. And you are one of the people that's openly talking about it and kind of confirming that it doesn't have to blow everything up. It doesn't have to totally take you off of whatever path and goals that you have in life. You got through it. So I think it takes incredible strength to be able to do that. And if it weren't for that, we wouldn't be where we're at today with this great book where you actually got to fulfill your goal. You said, how many years did you spend on this Colorado Trail?
It was a 6-year project, off and on, yeah, with about half of it done the last year. But yeah, I like what you said. I think anyone who struggled with anxiety, depression, mental illness knows that it's probably never fixed. There's never a point where, oh, I don't have this problem. Instead, you learn tools for managing it, and you learn barometers in your own body and your own feelings of, oh, I'm getting close to my red line. I need to back off. I need to have less on my plate. And the trail is another example of that. In some ways, a very stressful experience, but I had developed really good tools for managing my anxiety and my feelings so that I could work through it. But it's not like you can ever forget about that aspect of yourself.
I mean, one of the things that we're talking about here is fear. And fear is ever present in our financial and life journeys. It's a brainstem reflex. It's a survival reflex. We have to learn to stomach a down market and overcome our fear in order to realize true wealth, really, not succumb to the whipsaw. And you didn't just use traditional methods of healing. You didn't use traditional methods of healing mentally when you were, say, off for a year. You relied at times on your father. You relied on your wife. You relied on homeopathic methods. And you also found that traditional medicine in your physical healing didn't meet your needs either. It's incredible that you found a way, not necessarily along the traditional path.
Yeah, it's a good point. A lot of readers have been interested in that, and some have challenged me on it. But it was my own path. It was a mixture. Again, as Jackie pointed out 20, 25 years ago when I was overcome with anxiety, this was a lot less well understood. People were a lot less open about it. It was not something I wanted to advertise to my coworkers. I didn't even want to talk about it with my family very much. So that was a bit of a solo project to find my way through that. The physical issues, I have an ankle sprain that never really healed well, the hamstring. I did get some help from traditional care, but these chronic pain sports injuries are not always clear-cut what to do about them. And so that's why physical therapy, exercise, crutches, it was my own mixture that got me through this.
Yeah, and then on the trail, you had several experiences where you dealt with sort of sometimes even life-threatening issues like hypothermia and fear of not being able to make it when you're out there, say, on your own. At my age now, I'm like, even if I'm on a sort of a simple trail and I'm often with my wife and a buddy, it's like diving with a buddy, but you didn't always do that. And what if you break your leg? What if you're stuck in the environment? What did that feel like, dealing with that?
Well, it's not trivial, and I'd prepared for it my whole life because I've done many backpacking trips, many long overnight rock climbs even. I know the dangers, I know what to do about them, I have the best equipment I can buy. Still, when you're on your own, you're the one that has to solve the problem if something really serious happens. And I was always uber careful for the pieces of the trail I did by myself. I literally slow my pace down. I take time to make decisions about hopping over rocks and logs and stream crossings, being very deliberate, knowing that I can't afford to twist an ankle or get myself hurt out here. I also carried a satellite communicator so I could call for help anywhere, although that help could be a day coming. So if I had an acute problem, that's not going to do me much good. You need to have the right gear, you need to be prepared, you need to understand the techniques, and you need to be deliberate. And it's still some risk, but the reward was huge for me.
I love your passion when it comes to that. And the best part of the book, I think initially I did think it was the super hiking book and all of that. And I do a little bit of hiking. Now, compared to you, Darrow, my hiking is nothing, but I have some parks in my area, and that is the biggest part of my day. I don't even have a dog, so I don't need to walk my dog or anything. But if I can get in at least like a 3-mile hike every day, I feel really good. Now, these are soft ones probably compared to you, but you had been doing this even before you retired, and that answered your question. I don't know how easy it was to come to that conclusion, but it answered your question is like, what do I do after I retire? And I'm listening to the passion in your voice, the passion that's in the book about this is what you love to do. It doesn't have to resonate with everybody. This is perfect for Darrow. And this gives you like this gratification, and that was your thing. So I hope that everyone listening will think about what is their thing. It could be the thing you're doing all the time now, but maybe you don't have the time to do it as much as you want or the way that you want to do it. So I appreciate you digging deep and sharing so much more than the hiking jargon or the hiking technique. So everybody should take a look at this book because it will give you inspiration for your own journey.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And reviewers have said the book's very approachable. And that was a very interesting aspect of writing this book because I was not a newbie like Cheryl Strayed and Wild. I had decades of outdoor experience. I've climbed big walls, El Capitan and Yosemite. So I wasn't someone who didn't know what he was doing out there. And it was tempting to write a book where I was this sort of hero of the story and had everything dialed in and master of, the whole experience. And then I realized I wasn't. I had physical problems and mental problems, and the book would be more accessible to people if I just talked about them honestly.
One thing that I find interesting in your journey, both before and after retirement, is you needed to withdraw from the standard pathway of life. in order to heal and follow your passions. This seemed to connect you with your father, but at times it would disconnect you from your family. How did you deal with this connection-disconnection conundrum as you were pursuing more of a solo passion in life?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Every member of my family has some connection to the outdoors, so that helped. And I talk about some of my recovery in the book in terms of being a father to my son who got very interested in mountain biking and climbing. So it gave us this connection and also gave me a reason to get back outdoors and sort of reclaim that part of my life after I'd had the breakdown. And then to some extent the same with my wife. And then she and I do some things outdoors, but there are other things that we need to do on our own. That continues to be a work in progress to make sure that I'm keeping my family connection strong even while I'm pursuing my own dreams. But I think I've gotten a lot smarter about doing that than I was when I was younger.
I mean, we can overdo it where it sort of distracts from a relationship, diminishes a relationship, and finding that balance between overdoing it with finance and staying in the present, as George Kinder says, because in the present is the only moment we are free. And you found flow in the woods. We find flow with our families when we're present. We're not on our devices. We're looking in each other's eyes and in the moment with ourselves or with others. I mean, it is so important for, like I said, finding flow, finding freedom, finding joy and happiness, right?
Oh, I 100% agree. I like the way you put that. And guys in particular maybe can get obsessed with fire. I skimmed your article on that, on burning out. I was obsessed with rock climbing. That was like the purpose of my life for a few decades. And it wasn't healthy for my family relationships. And I'm very fortunate that I figured that out before it was too late.
Because we've seen divorce in this community where maybe that's a component of it. We talk about financial infidelity and financial irresponsibility, but financial over-responsibility can have the same effect, say, on a marriage or a partnership. It's easy to overdo it out of fear and then, honestly, the need for control. And one of the ways we can, I think, become happiest in life is when we realize that life is a team sport and we need to relinquish this lone wolf control aspect to ourselves. What do you think?
Yeah, very well put. I can't say it better. It's been a long project for me learning that, and I've tried to tell the story of me learning that in this book. Yep.
Well, and Darrow, I know you don't focus a lot on the personal finance stuff anymore. Do you still write it all on the blog?
Occasionally I'll do a post, yeah.
I'm just curious if you have seen any changes because you pretty much started around 2011 with your blog and really getting into this. Well, it might have been before then because you had to be able to retire early and looking at your numbers. But what are your thoughts about the evolution of the financial independence, retire early movement, community? Have you seen changes that you like, don't like?
Yeah, I would like to think more about that. It has a different sense. There are a lot more people involved. There are a lot more young people involved. There's a lot more diversity than there used to be. So I'm not sure I can sum it all up. I really believe in this principle and people living responsibly, doing the work they love to do, not what they have to do to make a living. And so these ideas are really important to me, and I'm excited to see the way the movement has blossomed. I feel some frustration for people involved in it, trying to make some income off of it because it's just highly competitive these days, and there's a lot of information out there.
Yeah, there's even a ETF they just came out with called the Fire ETF or something, which is clearly a marketing thing. I've never even heard of these guys that's managing it or whatever. But you hit on diversity. I definitely think it's gotten more diverse. I mean, even our catching up to FI community where we are late starters because back in the day it was mainly young engineers like yourself, right? And now you've got every kind, single moms, divorced people, people that are a little bit older that's just waking up. And Bill and I realized that this gap existed, and that's why Catching Up to FI was born in the first place. It was just always interesting to hear from someone that was there since the beginning.
We have a lot to learn from you and your evolution. And one of the things you did was you realized you weren't a through hiker. Your goal was segmentally doing this and connecting the dots. And sort of, we don't need to have a big, hairy, audacious goal. Like, I haven't accomplished a goal unless I'm one of those very few people that's able to mentally and physically get through the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Coast Trail, or even the Colorado Trail in one fell swoop. And you took little bites out of the elephant and ate the whole thing. What did it feel to realize this goal?
Oh, it was amazing. That's an interesting thing you pointed out. I'm very incremental in the way I approach life. I don't like taking big risks. I'd rather take a small piece, evaluate how that went, perfect the system, do a little bit more. And then finally on the trail, the last year, 2021, I did about half the trail over a few months one summer. So I got some of the flavor of what it would have been like to be a through hiker. But I'm not. As you say, I did it in sections, no more than 4 or 5 days at a time. I can't imagine what it's like to be a through hiker, but when I touched that milepost on the very last segment, it was unbelievable to just stand there. I was by myself on this huge plateau in the middle of Colorado, a remote spot, and just reflect back over the 6 years and the almost 500 miles I'd covered to have achieved that goal, and then just all the micro experiences embedded in that, all the incredible moments of flow, basically, of feeling connected to the universe, of feeling strong and fit. Yeah, it was an amazing experience.
I know how that feels because I ran a much shorter version of your marathon in running a physical marathon and raising my arms at the finish line and realizing that this has been a journey not just of 3.5 hours in my case. It was a journey of several months leading up to it, where you needed a plan, you needed to follow that plan, trust in the plan, that it would carry you to the finish line. That journey is similar to fire. And one of the things that I think happens with goals is the initial elation and then sort of a depression. You've reached it, and then what next? Did you have a dip in that emotion afterwards and realize, okay, I've done that. What do I have to look forward to now that I've accomplished this? How did that feel for you?
I did have a little bit of that, but pretty quickly, and I won't give away the ending of the book, but I had a couple experiences there at the very end that told me, oh, you need to write a book about this. This is a story. There's a definite arc. There's an exciting set of challenges in the middle. There's a clear ending that's very satisfying. And so pretty quickly, my next project became getting this book written. And I still did and do a lot of hiking. I don't know that I have another long trail in me, but getting the book written was honestly harder than hiking the trail. A really tough intellectual project. And that has kept me busy the last 4 years. That's right. Jackie knows that very well, having done a couple books.
How funny. And you did a couple books before that. So perhaps that helped prepare you just a little bit. So what was your writing process like? Like, for instance, you still hiked. So when you go on long hikes, like, do you take a break and you stop in a certain place? Like, how many hours a day are you walking? And did you incorporate any writing into your hiking journeys every day?
So on the trail, on the main Colorado Trail, I kept a written journal and took tons of photos. And I have a pretty good memory for physical details, so that's where the body of that information came from. But then as I started writing it down in the book, I guess every writer knows this, it gets in your brain, you're just haunted with the book, and you're constantly getting, oh, I could phrase this better, here's a concept I need to cover, I need to move this around. And this would happen in the middle of my hikes, it would happen all day long when I wasn't writing. And so I had an app on my phone that I could email myself ideas, and I used that thousands of times. And then most days I would allocate somewhere between 2 to 4 hours a day to making progress on the book, although I did take big chunks of time off. But it was the consistency of just being committed. Okay, this is an enormous project. I have no idea when this is going to finish, but I just need to put a couple quality hours in today, and I'll get there if I keep at it.
And one thing you did that you mentioned, and I want to mention to our audience, is there is a photo travel log. The beauty of what you saw was so impressive, and that you felt compelled also to share that with the audience. And that's a companion to the book that I have yet to explore. How important was the visual to the written.
It was really important because I used the photos to reconstruct scenes from the hike. I knew I was there, I knew the vague amount, but I'd pull up the photo and get the details, and it would help me describe. And a lot of people enjoy the nature writing in the book, and that comes from the photos. Even if details weren't in the photo, it would refresh my memory of, oh, that's what we were doing then. And then they're just gorgeous. I think everyone agrees the photos are amazing, and it's more credit to the Colorado Trail than me. But it would get me inspired, like, wow, this was an amazing experience. I need to finish this book because it was unbelievable out there.
Yeah, and I bet your technical writing skills came in handy because you were trying to make sure you were as clear as possible in painting that picture for the people that wanted to imagine this trail. Where did you get those savvy writing skills from? Like, did you take journalism class in college or something?
So those skills were really helpful, but the thing I did have to learn is how to tell a story, which is a different animal from writing nonfiction. I joined a really great critique site called the Critique Circle, where writers trade critiques of each other's work, and several people there got really interested in my story. They were very talented fiction writers, and they helped me learn how to connect with a reader's feelings and describe things in a way, and then write dialogue. And those are things you don't learn writing a nonfiction financial book that you have to use if you're going to tell a compelling memoir. And so I'm really grateful to those people who took me under their wing and taught me how to do that.
And then there's dialogue in here that isn't with another person. There's dialogue with yourself. There are moments here that are not unlike Tom Hanks' movie, what's it called, Stranded or Survivor, where he talks to Wilson, the volleyball. Did you have a physical object that you took with you that embodied the conversation with yourself?
No, I mean, the crutches in some way were the physical symbol of the hike that were with me every minute of the hike. But the dialogue in my head, I mean, those of us who are introverts are very familiar with this. I guess all of us are. But in the book, I use italic generally to note what's going on in my head. And yeah, that's a big part of the hike.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of introverts in the financial independence movement. And then a lot of us have our own mental health journeys, and your vulnerability in telling yours helps us therapeutically acknowledge ours. How important is it to be vulnerable in this community and avoid necessarily the technical so that we can heal too? Because your book is helping heal my own journey.
Wow, that's great to hear. It's been a journey for me to write about and be open about that part of my life. But I learned early on that if I wanted to write a book that really could connect with people, that I had to tell that story. And that part of it, you can be vulnerable, you can be open about that and still do awesome, incredible things. It doesn't make you incompetent or unsuccessful at life. You can accomplish amazing things while still acknowledging that you've got these limitations or these things you have to deal with. And so the book is my attempt to communicate that as best I can.
You did a great job with putting that book together. I wanted to mention, we normally do this at the top of the show. We save this towards the end because you have two charities that are close to your heart. And from our discussion today, we kind of found out why. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about them. The first one was the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And then the second one was Colorado Trail. Tell us about both of those.
Yeah, those are super close to my heart. NAMI, I guess it's pronounced, they're kind of the focal point for a lot of research and support systems for mental health issues far more serious than what I dealt with, but they're trying to reduce human suffering and give people a point of contact who are suffering from depression, anxiety, whatever. So I really appreciate their work. I know they've helped friends of mine. I've seen family members struggle with mental health, so that's super important to me. And then the Colorado Trail Foundation is the nonprofit that maintains the Colorado Trail. A bunch of great people who spend their summers working on the trail, preventing erosion, rerouting it, marking it. And that is such a resource that makes so many people happy, reduces so much stress in the world. Even if you're not going to through hike it, you can go out after work in the Denver area and hike pieces of it. So it's such a gift. I profile the woman who spearheaded the construction of the trail, Goody, who is an amazing individual. And all these people have just given us such a gift to create something like the Colorado Trail.
Yeah, the fire movement in its essence, as Mr. Money Mustache Pete Adney talks about, is a green movement, whether we realize it or not. We are utilizing less resources. We're not succumbing to the consumption culture and not living paycheck to paycheck. We are taking care of our internal nature, external nature, and focusing really outward. It can seem selfish to reach fire, but in some ways it's selfless. And we need to, I think, focus at times more on the giving that we are doing in freeing ourselves from the shackles of, say, the golden handcuffs, and opening the possibilities of creating and giving back to the world and adding to its sort of non-productive, robust culture.
Very well put. Yeah, that green aspect of FI was always super important to me, and I had to kind of throttle it in a little bit on my blog because I wasn't sure people wanted to hear it. But this stage of my life, hiking the Colorado Trail, it manifests. There are many, many passages in the book about what I'm seeing in the environment as I go through, and I couldn't be more supportive of the idea of us all consuming less and living more effectively and efficiently by managing our wealth intelligently.
Quick question, since you're mentioning the environment, does anything in your investment portfolio is like the ESG investing or anything like that?
One of my bigger investments is Vanguard's ESG fund. I won't say that I'm convinced that's the best way to help the environment, but in that small domain, it's a small thing that I did. Yeah.
You talk about on the trail sort of the fact that there are people that take advantage of the trail and leave a trace behind. There's garbage on the trail. There's waste. And my son grew up in sort of a pack it in, pack it out philosophy. Do you think we should be more conscious of taking care of our environment that way and leaving it how we found it?
Absolutely. To the point of repetition and hopefully not turning readers off, I hit those themes in the book. The book is a how-to on how to travel light, leave no trace, all of the best backpacking techniques. I complain about and go into the trash, the toilet paper, how to use the bathroom in the woods. The other issues I've seen, the use of our public lands for grazing cattle, which are highly destructive, and maybe we don't need to do so much of that anymore. The broad-scale death of trees at high altitudes, about 40% of the high-altitude trees in Colorado are dead from Beetle-Kill related to the climate warming. You just cannot avoid seeing these impacts when you go out hiking. And so I try to talk about them constructively in the book and explain what I'm seeing and hope that more and more people will get interested in protecting our public lands.
The book touches on so many themes. It touches on family relationships, external relationships, relationship to our environment, for backpackers on the how-tos. I love the concept of traveling light because we clutter our lives with stuff. And then if you do your Camino, if you walk the Camino, if you walk these trails, you realize, I don't need so much to survive. I really need very little. And why do I weigh myself down with so much stuff?
Exactly. It's one of the parts of backpacking that I find the coolest, that I can survive for a week at a time with just what I can carry on my back, plus water I get in the wilderness. And it just drives home how little you need to be happy. It's one of the aspects of backpacking I enjoy the most.
We focus on what is enough. And that seems to be the philosophical battle for everybody in life, and especially, and we're much more conscious of it in the FIRE movement. It's kind of our enemy and our friend, enough. It's this moving goalposts, and reaching retirement for late starters alike. We chase this moving goalpost, putting our stake in the sand and saying, you know what? I've reached it. I have more than enough, and it's time to give back to my family, my community, and move on into that phase of life that you're in. You seem very peaceful, happy. You're turned 65. You probably haven't taken Social Security yet, but now you have Medicare. What do the next 15, 20 years look like for you?
You hit the nail on the head. I feel getting to do this hike, getting to write the book about it, I've realized my major goals in life. I've gotten to achieve my dreams and then write about them and tell them to other people. And what I'm focused on for the years I got remaining is how to give back. What's the most effective way for me to give back? And that starts with me talking about the book and all these important ideas that I think we've covered. It's been a great conversation. Those ideas are really important to me. The protecting the environment and living frugally, dealing with your mental and physical health issues. Right now, I feel like talking about the book is the best way for me to give back, but that could shift. I'm at a stage where I've won the lottery, and it's just about the best way to distribute the proceeds and trying to make it less about me.
Well, that is beautiful. And Darrow, tell us the name of the book again. And if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Yeah, so it's 2 Sticks, 1 Path, A Journey Beyond Fear on the Colorado Trail. The website dedicated to the book is trailmemoir.com, and it also has reviews of a couple dozen other books in that genre that I think well of, so you can get other reading in that space if you like it. And then the book's available on Amazon and Kindle and paperback. And then I do still occasionally write for caniretireyet.com.
I'm not sure which order to read them in. First, that 2 Sticks, 1 Path, or can I retire yet? Which questions do we really need to ask ourselves first? It's important to ask the important questions. It's important to discuss them with others. I think we've accomplished a lot today in an hour, and I want to thank our guest, Darrow Kirkpatrick, for spending some of his precious time with us today.
Thank you, Bill and Jackie.
So, Bill, as you know, we cannot do this show without our amazing staff and the people that help us put this on. Our social media maven is Diana Falk, and our editor is Fritz Brazard. We love them, and they keep us going.
Yeah, Jackie, I mean, this show wouldn't have the quality it has without our folks, our peeps. And we'd also like to give you a few calls to action for the show. We love our community, and we hope you love us back. If you would like to support the show and our mission to help late starters, you can do that at Buy Me a Coffee, which is a platform that allows you to make a donation. The link is in the show notes and on the website.
Check out the show notes for resources mentioned in today's show. Also, head on over to our website at catchinguptofy.com and check out our vetted resources, partners, and affiliates for discounts and their services, because we love sharing great deals.
Please share the show with others and head on over to our Facebook community to help us grow. If you prefer video, head on over to YouTube and watch the show there. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Catching Up to Fi. We would appreciate it if you could also leave us a 5-star review to help our message reach others.
And while we are financial educators that love to teach, remember that our content is for general education and information purposes only. We are not providing financial, legal, or tax advice. Always do your own research or consult a professional before making important decisions.
So, Jackie, we'll see our audience next time on Catching Up to Fi. Cheers.